This video is a response to Glen Scrivener, who argues that everyone already has faith in something that resembles the resurrection, so it actually makes sense for all of us to believe in Christianity, especially the resurrection of Jesus. It's a bold claim, and while I can appreciate where he's coming from, trying to show that Christian faith resonates with universal human experience, I don't think that logic holds up. In fact, I think Glen, like many Christian apologists, is conflating two very different things. That confusion runs through his whole argument, and is something I'll unpack in this video. He may not be doing it intentionally, but the way he presents faith risks misleading viewers by blurring what Christianity actually requires people to believe. So I'm making this reaction video not to mock, but to clarify. Let's get into it.
Is faith just a bunch of concepts you have to submit to? As though Christians have done an Indiana Jones, we just shut our eyes, we put our hands on our heart, and we just say, dang it, virgin birth, why not? If that's the price of entry, sign me up, sure. If that were true, then the process of becoming a Christian would be about adding items to our list of unpopular opinions. This video is all about saying that is not how faith works.
Wait, are you saying that to be a Christian, you don't actually need to believe Jesus was God incarnate? That the virgin birth in Matthew and Luke isn't something you have to affirm as historically true? What about the resurrection? Do you mean we don't need to believe that Jesus physically came back from the dead 2,000 years ago? If that were the case, Christianity would be a lot more inclusive. But as the video unfolds, it becomes clear that's not what Glen means. He still believes Christians must affirm all those controversial doctrines. He's just trying to make them feel less controversial.
Everyone is a believer, all of us. All the time. We all believe in things that you cannot see, touch, taste, or feel. We live our lives by core convictions that are not the result of mathematical proofs or scientific studies.
Now, here's the problem. This is a category error. A conviction doesn't need to be a historical fact. I am deeply committed to protecting and nurturing my family. I don't need scientific studies or logical proofs to justify that. It's a value, not a verifiable claim about the past. It's not about whether something happened. It's about what matters. So when I say loving one's family is important, I'm expressing a moral value. But if I were to say loving one's family is true, that would sound odd. Why? Because true or false are the kinds of words we use for objective claims, like Donald Trump is the current president of the United States. That's either true or false, depending on the year. But loving one's family isn't true or false. It's good or bad, admirable or selfish, depending on your moral framework. That's why Glen's framing is misleading. He shifts between value judgments and factual truth claims as if they are interchangeable. He says, you already live by convictions that aren't based on science, so it shouldn't be hard to believe in miracles like the virgin birth or the resurrection. But that's not how this works. Valuing redemption or compassion isn't the same as believing someone rose from the dead. One is a personal or moral commitment. The other is a claim about what did or didn't happen in the real world. This confusion between meaning and historical fact, between moral resonance and empirical belief, is the thread that runs through Glen's entire argument. And in this video, I'm going to show you why it matters. Because once you see this distinction clearly, a lot of the rhetorical sleight of hand falls apart. Hello, my friends. This is Shane from Mindful Living. If you are here for the first time, welcome. And if you have been with me before, welcome back. This channel is all about being mindful of the ideas we hear from others, and mindful of the beliefs we already hold. I want to help you assess which ideas are worth keeping and which ones deserve to be challenged, or even let go of. My main focus is on religion. I used to be a Christian pastor and missionary, but I've since deconverted. That experience naturally gives me a certain perspective or a bias. But I believe it also gives me valuable insights that can help others who are thinking critically about faith and belief. Now, back to the topic. Here's how Glen Scrivener sets up his argument.
I'll summarize them under 4 headings. We all believe in an Easter-shaped redemption. We all believe in Easter-shaped relationships. We all believe in Easter-shaped recovery. And we all believe in an Easter-shaped reality, an Easter-shaped cosmos. You and I, whether we're Christians or not, we already believe in a bunch of stuff. You might not think that you have any faith muscles to flex. I'm telling you, you use your faith muscles every day in every aspect of your life. You constantly expect, trust in, lean into a shape of life, and that shape is a death and resurrection shape.
From the outset, Glen is trying to universalize the Easter story, suggesting that whether you are Christian or not, you already live as if the resurrection is true. That's a bold rhetorical move. And I'll be the first to admit, I value redemption. I believe people can grow, change, and overcome the past. I believe it's good to help others get back on their feet. I believe that tragedies can have silver linings. I value relationships too, deeply, on both a personal level and a societal one. Healthy relationships matter. Peaceful cooperation is better than conflict. That's not a religious belief, that's just lived experience. I also accept that idea of recovery. People recover from trauma, loss, or failure all the time. It's hard. It doesn't always happen. But when it does, it's powerful. And yes, there's a rhythm in nature too. Life follows death, and death feeds life. The cycle is real. But it doesn't require any supernatural overlay. So here's the issue. By calling all of these experiences Easter-shaped, Glen is trying to collapse a broad range of human values into a specific theological story. He takes redemption, recovery, and meaning, and then retrofits them into Christianity. But those ideas existed long before Christianity, and they exist outside of it too. It's a rhetorical move that feels comforting at first, but it's conceptually misleading. And I suspect Glen knows this on some level, which is why he works so hard to justify the connection.
You might think to yourself, I'm not sure I can believe in the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth. I think you're already inhabiting a story of this world, and that story that you live by is familiar. And actually, belief in Jesus does not add to the absurdity of that life script. Belief in Jesus makes sense of the script.
But does it? Just because I find meaning in themes of redemption and recovery doesn't mean I'm obligated to believe that a man literally came back from the dead in Roman-occupied Palestine. Would we say the same about other stories? Should we believe that Romulus, the mythical founder of Rome, truly ascended into heaven just because his story also involves transformation and divine favor? What about Elvis? People have claimed to see him after his death. Are we meant to believe those claims too? Or is this logic supposed to apply only to Jesus? If Glen wants to argue that Christian belief uniquely explains the human experience, then he needs to show why that belief is more than just emotionally resonant. It needs to be historically and logically grounded. Otherwise, we are just selecting one resurrection story and ignoring all the others. That's not reason, that's preference.
Why should you think it's good or wise or admirable to give up your life for others? Isn't natural selection the survival of the fittest? Well, this is the sacrifice of the fittest, so that the weakest might survive. That's not natural.
This is a misrepresentation of evolutionary theory. Survival of the fittest doesn't mean every man for himself. Evolutionary fitness isn't just about individuals out-competing each other. It often plays out at the group level. Humans are social animals. We survive better in cooperative groups rather than in isolation. And in social species, acts of altruism, like caring for the vulnerable or even sacrificing for others, can increase the survival of the group as a whole. That's not supernatural, that's biology. So yes, it's perfectly natural that we admire sacrifice. It helps our species thrive. When Glen frames altruism as not natural, he's either misunderstanding evolution or attacking a Strawman version of it. If he wants to critique evolutionary theory, he should at least represent it accurately.
You already believe in the sacrifice of the fittest, and that's absurd, right?
No, it's not absurd, and I've just explained why. But even if it were absurd, it wouldn't justify accepting other absurdities. That's not how reasoning works. Believing that people sometimes sacrifice themselves for the greater good is very different from believing that a man rose from the dead 2,000 years ago. Again, Glen is conflating two categories, moral values and historical claims. You don't need to believe that Harry Potter is historically true to embrace the themes of courage and sacrifice. You don't need to believe the Lord of the Rings literally happened to be moved by Frodo's selflessness. These stories work because they tap into something real in us. But we understand they are fiction. And that's the bottom line. Just because I value a principle doesn't mean I must believe the story that illustrates it is factually true. That's the key distinction Glen keeps glossing over.
You kind of already believe in sacrifice, don't you? Jesus allows you to really believe in it, and not only in sacrifice, but in the redemption that comes through.
I don't need Jesus to really believe in sacrifice. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. The reason Jesus' story resonates with so many people is because we already value sacrifice. The theme came first. The story stuck because it reflected something we already recognized as noble and beautiful. That's why it was preserved and passed down, not because it revealed something completely alien to human intuition. Sacrifice has deep biological and social roots. You can observe it in many species, not just humans. It's not uniquely Christian, and it certainly doesn't require supernatural validation. So no, believing in Jesus isn't the foundation for believing in sacrifice. It's the other way around. And again, appreciating a story doesn't require you to believe it's historically real. That should be self-evident. But it's something Glen seems to strategically blur.
You and I cannot help but plug the little stories of our lives into a bigger story. Something will go wrong in your life, and you will tell yourself something like, the sun will come out tomorrow, lightning doesn't strike twice, it's all going to be okay. You can't not plug that little story into a bigger story. You can't not live with some kind of hope that is shaped by a greater narrative. And the story we turn to when our little stories turn dark, those stories are rarely the atheist story. When something goes wrong in your life, you don't then remind yourself, don't worry, Glen, you've come from nothing and you're heading nowhere. That's not what you do. You don't think, come on, Glen, you're a DNA replicator and you're going to pass on your genes somehow. Or don't worry, Glen, it's an uncaring universe and we're flinging out into heat death. Nobody plugs their little story into an atheist narrative in order to help them through because we need hope.
This is a caricature of atheism. Glen isn't describing how atheists actually live or think. He's describing how he imagines atheists must feel, based on his own framework. Yes, people often turn to bigger stories in times of crisis, but those stories don't need to be religious or supernatural. A soldier might find meaning in a story of national service. A scientist might find it in a pursuit of discovery. A single parent might see hope in building a better life for their kids. None of these require belief in miracles or a divine plan. They are grounded in real goals, real community, and real purpose. Even those struggling with poverty or hardship, who may not have the luxury to think about grand ideals, still hold on to hope. Not cosmic hope, maybe, but the hope that next month's rent can be paid or that their child will have a better future. That is a bigger story, and it matters deeply. No God required. The reality is there's no such thing as the atheist narrative. Atheists aren't part of a unified worldview. Some are pessimistic, some are hopeful, some live for family, some for truth, some just for getting through the week. Whether we are hopeful or not has more to do with personality, experience, and mental health than metaphysics. And let's be honest, clinical depression doesn't check your religion before it sets in. I have known several Christians. people who prayed regularly, read their Bible, and sincerely believed God loved them, who still ended their own lives. These weren't casual believers, they were fully invested in their faith, but belief didn't protect them from despair. So, no, belief in God isn't a guarantee of hope, and lacking belief doesn't doom someone to meaninglessness. Hopelessness and hopefulness are human experiences, not religious ones. Religion can provide hope, but it is not the only source. When Christian apologists misrepresent atheists to make their own worldview look better, it's not just unnecessary, it damages credibility. You don't need to knock others down to lift your faith up.
In fact, we have to believe in something like the hero's journey, because in the hero's journey, persons are ultimate, and purpose, and love, and sacrifice, and redemption, and hope. All those things make sense on the hero's journey. None of them make sense on a purely atheistic story.
I really wish Glen would drop these offhand swipes at atheism. They don't strengthen his argument. They just reveal a lack of understanding of what atheists actually believe. Atheism isn't a rejection of love, purpose, sacrifice, or meaning. It simply means not believing in God. That's it. Everything else, how we live, what values we hold, what stories move us, varies from person to person. Glen's claim sets up a false dichotomy. Either you believe in Christianity, or you are stuck in a meaningless, reductionist worldview where people are just DNA replicators. But that's not how evolution or atheism works. Yes, reproduction is a biological function, but that doesn't define who we are. Humans are social animals. We are wired to care for each other, to collaborate, to empathize, and yes, to sacrifice for one another. These traits promote group survival, which is why they are favored by natural selection. We value sacrifice not because we learned that from religion, but because it's part of how we have thrived as a species. So no, we don't need a deity to explain why sacrifice is meaningful. We are biologically and psychologically built to admire it. Just last week, I rewatched Interstellar with my family on Netflix. One of the central themes is the preservation of humanity. There is a moment where Dr. Brand says,
"We must think not as individuals, but as a species."
The idea that your life has meaning when it serves something beyond yourself is powerful. It resonates deeply. And it doesn't depend on Christianity or any religion at all. It's grounded in our shared humanity. When the future of the species is at stake, we don't need a theology textbook to recognize that some things are more important than individual survival. We just know. Now, some of you might be thinking, isn't biology a weak foundation for morality or meaning? I understand that concern. I used to be a Christian and I thought the same. But as I began deconstructing my faith, I realized something important. Even Christians don't operate on a fundamentally higher level when it comes to meaning and morality. They may say that God is the foundation of all purpose and value, but we can still ask the follow-up question, why is following God important to you? And often the answer sounds like this, because that's what we were created to do. God designed us to please Him and follow His commands. But if that's the justification, how is that categorically different from me saying that we evolved to value cooperation and self-sacrifice? In both cases, you are pointing to how we were made or how we function as the reason for what we value. It's just that one points to biology and the other points to theology. Structurally, the reasoning is the same. And let's be honest, many Christians aren't drawn to God out of admiration for His moral vision. Many believe for practical reasons, the forgiveness of sins, the promise of heaven, or the fear of hell. Those are deeply personal motivations, not metaphysical reflections on cosmic virtue. The truth is, the pursuit of Christian living often aligns with our biological and social instincts. Take evangelism, for example. It's rooted in a very human drive, the desire to help others and share what we believe is good. I used to be a missionary, and that's the way I saw it. Sharing the gospel felt meaningful because I believed it would benefit people. But here's the thing, that instinct to improve others' lives isn't unique to Christians. It's a human trait, and it exists across cultures, religions, and philosophies. You don't need a divine command to care about other people's well-being. That motivation is built into us. If you are a Christian, let me offer you a thought experiment. What if God said to you, I created you, so you are obligated to please me. I will be pleased if you follow my commands in this life, and I will also be pleased if you suffer in hell afterward. Even if you believe in me and obey everything I say, I will still send you to hell because that's what brings me satisfaction. Now, here's the question. Would you still obey this God? And if not, why not? Let me know in the comments. The point of this thought experiment is simple. Even within Christian theology, God doesn't just issue commands. He motivates obedience by appealing to our biological drive for well-being. Heaven is promised as the ultimate reward. Hell is the ultimate punishment. In other words, what drives belief and behavior is an abstract submission to divine will. It's the deeply human desire to seek joy and avoid suffering. So when Christians say, we follow God because He created us and commands us, that's not fundamentally different from me saying we are biologically wired to value well-being, empathy, and cooperation. In both cases, what we seek, what motivates us, is shaped by how we are built. That's why the Christian worldview isn't operating on a higher plane. It's grounded in the same human instincts. The difference is in the language and metaphors used, not the foundation of moral motivation. So when Glen ridicules atheists by saying their story can't account for love, hope, or meaning, he's not only misrepresenting atheism, he's overlooking how much Christianity itself leans on natural instincts. It's not that atheists reject meaning, it's that we recognize its origin in us, not in something outside of us.
When you offer kind words in the middle of an argument, you turn away wrath. That's actually how the Bible describes the cross. When Jesus came, He turned away wrath. And you know what that means? It means Easter is woven into everything, including relationships. Because who is Jesus? Jesus is the one who descends down into our quarrels and fights. He descends down into our hell. We have been yelling up at heaven, not wanting heaven, desiring our own way and chasing after other things, and we end up in disconnection and hell. But then, praise God, there is a gentle answer that comes down from heaven. His name is Jesus. He is the gentle word spoken to a harsh and hellish world.
Glen is a gifted communicator, no doubt about that. He weaves poetic language into his message beautifully. But beneath that poetic surface, there is a logical leap that shouldn't go unnoticed. Yes, we all long for healthy relationships. Yes, kindness can turn away wrath. But that doesn't automatically validate the theology Glen is advocating. It doesn't follow that because relationships matter to us, we should believe in Jesus as a divine peacemaker, unless you can first demonstrate that Jesus actually has the power to restore relationships. This is where Glen's argument drifts into wishful thinking. I value reconciliation as much as anyone. I want to see families healed, communities united, and nations choosing diplomacy over war. But that desire doesn't justify believing in a particular religious claim. Wishing something were true doesn't make it true. I hope everyone gets a thoughtful Christmas gift each year, but that doesn't mean Santa Claus is real. And even if belief in Santa did inspire some people to give gifts, it still wouldn't prove Santa exists. In the same way, we can ask, does belief in Jesus actually improve relationships? Well, if we look at the data, the answer isn't compelling. Christian churches are often just as prone to conflict and division as secular organizations. Christian marriages don't statistically last longer than non-Christian ones. That's a verifiable fact. There are many other factors that play a far more consistent role in relationship health: financial stability, mutual respect, cultural expectations, emotional intelligence, communication skills, and shared values. Religious belief can certainly help if both people share that faith, but the key variable here is alignment, not Jesus in particular. So no, Christianity isn't the answer to broken relationships. It's one approach among many. And when we reduce the complexities of human connection to a single theological claim, we oversimplify the problem and ignore other proven solutions. Sometimes what helps relationships most isn't faith, it's empathy, maturity, and the hard work of listening. Some Christians might respond, we are not talking about people improving relationships on their own. We are talking about Jesus being the embodiment of reconciliation, restoration, and healing. Okay, but what does that actually mean? And more importantly, how do you know that? We don't see Jesus physically walking around today restoring broken relationships. So where does that idea come from? If your only source is the Bible, then you also have to wrestle with the parts of the Bible that contradict that image. For example, what do you make of Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 to 36, where Jesus says,
"Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household."
Now, many Christians try to explain this away by saying, well, truth divides. It's not Jesus' fault that people reject the truth. But that completely dodges the original point. Glen's claim isn't just that the truth divides. He says Jesus came to reconcile, to de-escalate, to restore peace. Let's look at what Glen actually says.
Well, if you've ever believed in reconciliation, in de-escalation, in gentle words to turn away wrath, believe in Easter. Because Easter is the ultimate story in which heaven has come to de-escalate the situation, to absorb our hell, and to give us his heaven.
But here is the uncomfortable truth. Jesus didn't just give us heaven, he also condemns people. He judges non-believers. The book of Revelation portrays Jesus returning not as a gentle reconciler, but as an agent of wrath, executing judgment on those who reject his authority. So what kind of peacemaker are we talking about here? Jesus doesn't offer reconciliation in the way we usually understand it. Reconciliation requires both sides to make concessions for the sake of peace. But Jesus doesn't negotiate. He demands allegiance. He says, whoever is not with me is against me. Matthew chapter 12, verse 30. That's not reconciliation. That's authoritarianism. Agree with me or face judgment is not de-escalation, it's dominance. If I said we can have peace just as long as you agree with everything I say, you wouldn't call me a peacemaker, you'd call me controlling. So when Glen paints this soothing picture of Jesus as a cosmic therapist, gently absorbing our anger and handing out hugs, he's not telling the whole story. The Jesus of the Gospels is more complicated than that, and often more confrontational. Let's be honest about what we are dealing with. If Christianity is going to claim that Jesus is the ultimate example of peace and reconciliation, it needs to confront the passages that say otherwise. Otherwise, it's just selective storytelling.
We already live in a death and resurrection kind of world. And you say, really? I say, yeah, really. Think of 4 miracles that you are living inside of. The 4 miracles are everything has come from nothing, order has come from chaos, life has come from non-life, and minds have come from mindless matter. Those are 4 miracles, all of which are orders of magnitude more improbable than Jesus of Nazareth walking out of that tomb. But they are miracles that you live within, that you assume, that you lean into. They are the foundation of your life already.
This is what I call gish galloping, rattling off a series of sweeping claims to make his position sound well supported when none are relevant to the point he's trying to make, the historical resurrection of Jesus. I'm not going to tackle all 4 of those claims here. That would take hours. In fact, I've written an entire script on the fine-tuning argument alone, and that's probably going to be a full-length video by itself. If you are interested in that, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss when it's out. But for now, let me just ask, in what world are these the foundations of our lives. Seriously, does anyone wake up and make choices based on the idea that everything came from nothing or minds arose from mindless matter? No one I know, Christian or atheist, bases their relationships, careers, or personal values on those questions. They are interesting philosophical or scientific puzzles, but they are not moral frameworks or life principles. They are not what guide your parenting decisions or your views on justice or your friendships. These aren't miracles we lean into. They are questions we haven't fully answered yet. And most importantly, what does any of this have to do with whether Jesus physically rose from the dead in the first century Palestine? At best, Glen is pointing to these concepts to say, look, you already believe in wild, improbable things, so why not add one more? But that's not how reasoning works. Just because something is unexplained or counterintuitive doesn't mean anything goes. You don't get to smuggle in supernatural claims about a Jewish rabbi rising from the grave just because abiogenesis is still under scientific investigation. Let's think this through. Even if those four ideas Glen mentioned, everything from nothing, order from chaos, life from non-life, and minds from matter, were truly absurd, which I don't grant, what's the logical response? It's not, well, I already believe in absurd things, might as well believe in more. The rational move is the opposite. If you realize you have been believing absurdities, you stop. You don't double down. You reevaluate. You walk away. Imagine telling someone, you believe two obviously false things already, so it shouldn't be a stretch to believe a third. They will probably look at me like I'm crazy. And Glen goes even further. He suggests that believing in another absurdity might help make sense of the first absurdities, as if stacking in probabilities somehow creates a probability. That's not how logic works. That's not how truth works. So ask yourself, do you really want to be the kind of person who proudly collects absurdities just to make a belief system hang together? But Glen isn't done. Near the end of his video, he pivots from you already believe absurd things to another argument, one that's just as flawed, but in a different way.
I mean, put it this way, we all already believe in the resurrection of Christianity. That's a resurrection we all believe in. After all, Christianity was dead and buried on Good Friday, but since Easter Sunday, it has been growing like an expanding universe and transforming lives and civilizations like nothing else. What was the bang? What was the force, the power, the impetus to get this thing off the ground? Because without the actual resurrection, without the God of Easter behind this thing, I think you have immense difficulty accounting for Christianity. Christianity is definitely a thing. In fact, it is the biggest thing. The biggest sociological phenomenon the world has ever seen.
This is just an argument from personal incredulity. Glen can't imagine how Christianity could have grown unless Jesus actually rose from the dead. But just because he can't think of a natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. History is full of massive social movements with humble or even false beginnings. Islam exploded across continents. Mormonism went from golden plates in a forest to a global religion. North Korea deified its rulers. Ideas don't need to be true to change the world. They just need to be persuasive, well-timed, and backed by human psychology, political opportunity, or cultural momentum. For skeptics like me, the expansion of Christianity is not a mystery that requires a miracle. I don't need to believe Jesus rose from the dead to explain why Christianity grew. I can think of a dozen natural reasons, social, psychological, political, and historical, that made it succeed. Let me just give you a brief overview. First, remember, according to the Christian narrative, the reason Jesus only appeared to his disciples, he didn't show up to the masses or keep appearing century after century to new followers. The movement didn't grow because generation after generation saw the risen Jesus with their own eyes. No, the growth came from belief, not repeated eyewitness experience. And belief spreads for many reasons, especially when it's emotionally powerful. Think about the psychological appeal of Christianity. You are told that the Almighty God listens to your prayers, forgives your sins, has a plan for your life, and takes you to heaven after you die. That's incredibly comforting. You are told you are loved deeply, unconditionally by the Creator of the universe. That gives your life meaning and dignity. You are told you are part of a grand cosmic story, good versus evil, and your role in it matters. That's exciting. And of course, you are warned that if you don't believe, there are terrifying consequences, eternal hell. That adds pressure. This is a very powerful combination of promises and threats. It doesn't have to be factually true to be compelling. Now add to that the historical turning point. Constantine legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire, and Theodosius made it the state religion. Christianity didn't just spread, it was incentivized and enforced. People weren't just persuaded, they were sometimes required. Christianity became tied to power, politics, and empire. Then there's the missionary impulse. Christians believe they are saving souls, so they spread the message aggressively. And when European colonizers spread across the globe, they didn't just bring armies, they brought missionaries. Many indigenous cultures were forcibly converted. That's not persuasion, it's domination. Christianity spread by sword and sermon. And let's not forget, if Christianity's global reach is proof of its truth, then what do we say about Buddhism? It's still one of the major religions in the world, despite having almost no interest in evangelism. Did it spread through truth or cultural appeal? That logic cuts both ways. Now, I might do a full video on this history later, but here's my point. From a skeptic's point of view, there's no difficulty explaining why Christianity expanded. The only people who insist that it can't be explained naturally are usually the ones who have already committed to the supernatural explanation and cannot afford to let it go. Because if the resurrection isn't necessary to explain the rise of Christianity, that raises uncomfortable questions about their faith. And that's really what's at stake here. It's not that skeptics can't explain it, it's that believers can't let us explain it. Because the moment they allow natural explanations, the resurrection starts to look like religious assumption, not a historical conclusion. By the way, I find it a little ironic when Christians point to the popularity of Christianity as evidence for its truth. Have they forgotten what Jesus himself said?
For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it.
If we take Jesus at his word, then mass appeal isn't a mark of truth, it's a warning sign. According to that passage, the majority is on the wrong path. So if Christianity today is the largest religion in the world, maybe, just maybe, it fits the description of the broad road that leads to destruction. Now, I don't personally think that's how we should evaluate belief systems. I am not saying popularity makes something false, but it's odd that Christians, who supposedly take Jesus seriously, ignore this teaching when it's convenient. If they want to argue that Christianity is true because it's the biggest religion, they might want to double check with Jesus first. Just saying. So in the end, Glen's case for Christianity might sound poetic, even emotionally appealing, but once you strip away the beautiful language and examine the logic, it starts to fall apart. His arguments rely on misrepresenting atheism, confusing emotional appeal with truth, and shifting the burden of proof. And while I don't think Glen is being intentionally deceptive, I do think he's repeating a style of reasoning that's popular in some Christian circles, one that trades clarity for persuasion. Finally, I want to say that I don't blame Glen for making these logical fallacies. He might just be echoing the voices that influenced him. For example, in this video, he talks about Jordan Peterson, who is known for redefining terms like God and worship to mean things like conscience or priority. According to Peterson, if you exercise moral judgment, that somehow means you believe in God, at least implicitly. It's a clever move, but it's also a category error, It confuses value judgment with factual claims, and Glen makes a similar mistake here. If you are interested in a deeper dive into Peterson's arguments, I've made a separate video critiquing his logic. You can tap the screen to watch that next. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If you have made it this far, first of all, thank you. And if you haven't already, give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot, and it genuinely keeps me motivated to create more content like this. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.